Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to something new. So usually at that time, around that time on Thursdays, we do Draftbit office hours. By the way, I should introduce myself for those who don't know me. I'm George Duverger. I'm the head of product at Draftbit. That's why I'm talking about Draftbit right now. Draftbit is a mobile app builder, a no-code mobile app builder. So you can make your iOS or Android application, like native mobile application, without having to code. It's all visual. So that's what I do. And usually twice a week, we have office hours where we talk to users, and if they have questions, we answer them live and all that. Today, I'm going to do something slightly different. I want to experiment with something. And here's what I want to do. We've been rightfully very focused on helping user being successful using Draftbit, and that's great. And we're going to continue to do that. The office hours are coming back. This is not like a recurring thing right now. What I'm doing, but I've talked to a few folks who, like some people have done a lot of research on different no-code tools, and they want to use Draftbit specifically for the explicit reason, like our the fact that you can export code, the fact that it's a low code, you can inject your own code in, like all of those. I won't go into all that, but like there are many great reasons to use Draftbit. So some folks arrive to us, like wanting to use Draftbit. Some folks arrive to us not knowing much about Draftbit, and all they care about or they want is just make an app, right? And for those people, I wanted this session to be a little bit more focused towards those people. So people who don't know much about even no code, don't know much about Draftbit or our competitors, and they just want to make an iOS app, Android app, where should they get started? So that's what I kind of want to address today. So if that's you, if that's what you want to do, you're in the right place. If you want to build an app, don't know the code, let's start here. If you want to do that, there are several tools out there, and some of them are kind of all included. So you get, your visual application, like what it looks like, as well as your data. So like your database and your backend and all that thing. And it's sometimes all in one tool, which makes things a little easier. But it's all in the same location. It comes with some trade-offs. Like typically, that doesn't work if you already have your data somewhere else and it's not in that one tool. Also, if you want to not only make an app but maybe also a website and other kind of visible thing for users, then you can't quite do that because your data is just highly connected, tied to your app and nothing else. So anyway, many reasons. So another approach, just another way to think of it, is to decouple, to separate your front end and your back end. So the way things look. So that's your mobile app, your website. What else is there? Your metaverse, whatever you can imagine in terms of like a user experience. Decouple that from your data and your logic and like how you're like the value that you're creating for users. So that's what we believe. There are a few tools doing that out there. Draftbit is one of them. So we do believe that you're better served as user by having those two things separated, which also allow us to focus on one and do that one very, very, very well, while other companies can focus on the other one and do that piece very, very, very well. So, we do the client, we do the visual part of it. So that's why we call them a mobile app builder. We do the mobile app, we do the app itself, the thing you'll download in your App Store and Google Play Store. And then we use other tools, third-party tools, third-party services to host your data and provide that data to Draftbit, but maybe to other UI. So this is great, and like I said, like most time we focus on helping users to building their app. But today I want to also touch on that backend piece, because even though it's not Draftbit specific, that's what you have to deal with when you're building your entire app in this kind of approach, with those two things are separate. So we want to help, even on the back end, even though that's not what we sell or what we do. We want to help. So that's what I'm doing here. So I thought about like, what's the best format to help you guys do that. And so I'm experimenting with this format, which is essentially, it's going to be a tutorial. So I want to show you, instead of these different options I considered, maybe like a class on like computer science concept and things like that. And I opted for a more practical format, which is a tutorial. So I'm going to show you how to do a to-do list application. And we're going to use Draftbit and Airtable. And we're gonna look at the whole kind of from scratch to finish. And it won't be just focused on the Draftbit side. I'll cover Airtable as well and all the backend stuff. So yeah, it's gonna be very practical. I'll do it myself. It's gonna be live, no coding, and that's it. With that said, let me share my screen, and I'll start by, if you have any question, I should have mentioned that at the very beginning. There is a comment section. I highly encourage you to ask any questions. One thing I did not mention, but I have a very iterative mindset when it comes to work. And what I really want to do here is to, give it a try this time around for an hour, and then maybe I will do it again, maybe with a slightly different tutorial. And then over time, thanks to your question and the feedback I receive, essentially turning that into a more hopefully a higher quality tutorial that we can then, turn into a video and share that more broadly. So it will not necessarily have to be live for people who want to consume that information on their own time. So that's kind of the long-term plan if this goes well. So that to say, I need your help to provide feedback, to tell me what's clear, what's not clear, where should I spend more time, what I should skip ahead a little bit because it's a little too simplistic or obvious or straightforward. So let me know, please, in your feedback. Even like thumbs up, thumb down will be helpful. Okay, so enough chat. I'll get started. I do wanted to show you guys what the end result is going to be like. And so let me share my screen. Window. Okay, so I tweeted yesterday. Okay, so this is what I tweeted yesterday, and it's a little GIF of, and by the way, yes, it is pronounced GIF, of what we're going to try to do today. So you can see that it's an app. In this case, it's an Android app. The beauty of using tools like Draftbit is that it's built on top of React Native, which is just a technology that it's the same, and then you can create both iOS and Android apps. So it makes it, you do it once, and then you get to you get the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store for free. So that's pretty convenient. So here's the app. Like you type something in a text in the text area, in the text input, you type your task. It's a to-do list, as I mentioned. You click the plus, adds it to the list. Everything in the list is ordered chronologically. So as you add one, you just put it at the top. And then once you've added a few, you can click the checkbox, and that will kind of cross the text to indicate that you've completed that task. You can uncheck it; it'll uncross the text. You can edit it. So if you click on the words itself, it turns into an edit mode, and with a little text input that you can change the text. You can save that. And that's essentially it. Yeah, that's essentially it. That's the scope of what we're going to do today. And as I said, all the data is going to be saved, is going to persist in a database. And for that, I decided today to use Airtable. There are many other databases, Firebase, Zano, backend, backendless, Yeah, a ton. I might more will come to mind. I'll mention them. But like today, I figured the Airtable is a really easy place to start for people who don't know how to code. It's very easy. Superbase, Dave mentioned in the comments, that's a very good one as well. But that's a good example. Superbase is a little bit more on the technical side, and Airtable is definitely a little bit more on the kind of non-technical side, which comes with trade-off. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I figured something very user-friendly like Airtable would be appropriate. So that's what we're going to do. Okay. Enough. This is what we're going to do. So I'm going to head over to Draftbit. And I'm going to also head over to Airtable. And maybe that's where we'll start. So I have this to-do bit, which I might just rename it to-do list. Yeah, to-do list, to-do, I don't know. And it's for those who don't know Airtable, it essentially lets you create multiple bays, which are database essentially. And when you select one, you can create multiple tables. So it's a very similar concept to Excel or Google Spreadsheet or things like that. So here's I have one table that is called tasks. I could create another empty table that would be called foo, whatever it is, and you specify certain fields. So maybe each entry can have a name, some comments, an attachment, or a status. So that's just example of what you can do with Airtable if you're not familiar. In my case, I'm going to stick with my tasks table. And I'm going to keep it very, very simple to start. It's going to be a name, so the name of the task, and a status, like whether or not I've completed that task. And that's it. We won't do anything. Maybe later on we'll do fancier things like assigning it to someone or keeping track of when the last time you changed the status, whatever it is. But for now, I think simplicity is a good place to go. All right, to-do list. This is Draftbit that you're looking at. I'm going to start with a blank app. We have a wizard that kind of helps you get started, but I want to show you what it looks like from scratch. So it's easier to follow along. Okay. So in three clicks, you've now access to essentially an environment where you can develop or make an app, which I want to insist on that because it's almost lost on people who are not technical that the equivalent of those 3 clicks I just did in Draftbit would be maybe hours of figuring out how to install everything you need on your local machine between Xcode and all the things you might be missing on your computer. You might have to deal with like command line commands. So we abstract all that. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to rely on your local machine. It's online. It's in the cloud. Everywhere you are, you can access Draftbit, and you have access to the app that you're building, and you can build with others. So it can be a collaborative thing. Everybody's looking at the same app, which is a big advantage from kind of moving away from your own machine, local machine, to a web-based solution. Okay. So here I am. This is Draftbit. And what I want to do is essentially, that's on the left-hand side, those are my screens. So maybe I'll rename them so it's a lot more clear. So I have a list. That's going to be my list of all my tasks. Right underneath here, I have components. Maybe I'll make a little bit bigger. Components. So that's where I'm going to put my kind of widgets, so my little checkbox and the text and the save button and all of that. They're going to go in that tree. Right in the center is my canvas, essentially where I'm going to see what I'm building. And on the right hand side, you see there's a lot of little buttons and icons. And this is actually, it can be a little overwhelming, but this lets you customize more or less everything. So everything that you can do in code, all the settings that you have access to in code, we surface them on that right hand side. So it's very complete. It can be a little overwhelming, like I just said, for people who are not familiar, but hopefully you don't, you only have to care about it as much as you care about customizing your app. And you can learn as you go. Maybe at first you just care about a few properties like the changing the color of the text, and as you learn more, you can start to go into deeper and more advanced settings. Okay, so that's my app. We'll talk about the preview and publishing when we get a little of something in it. So what I want to do essentially is on that list screen, I want to show that list, right? That list that's in Airtable right now, I want to show it in Draftbit. So the way I do that, and by the way, to-do list is just one example, and it's kind of a good example because it's simple enough and people know what the outcome should be. But those concepts are going to be the same for whatever application, more or less the same for whatever application you're trying to build, right? If you think of your Instagram application, it's a similar concept, right? You'll have your database with pictures and users and comments, and you'll want to bring that data, that information into a visual app. So that kind of communication between your back and front end is going to follow the same concept. So hopefully you learn them here and you can apply them to whatever you're trying to do. I see a few people joining, by the way. So welcome everybody. Folks, there are a couple of names that I don't recognize. So great. That's always good to see new users. So let me know if you have any question as I go through. I'm really, like I said at the beginning, one of the main reasons for this is to get feedback from myself so we can do a better job at it over time. So how do I bring my Airtable data into Draftbit? I'm going to start with that little like database icon, those little like three cylinder on top of each other. So I'm going to click on that. This is your like data model. It's called API and cloud services. But that's how we're going to establish the connection with the backend. So we already support a bunch of backends, as I mentioned before: Supabase, Backendless, Airtable, CD, Zapier, WordPress, all those guys. But you can always, at any given time, as long as your backend offers a REST API, which is just a specific language between like the backend and the front end, and most services out there support that. It's the most common way to communicate between those two. So as long as you support that, whether it's your own solution or if you use a third party, most likely they'll provide that. You can connect it to Draftbit. So here it is. I'm going to use to-do list, and I'm going to give it a name. That I'm going to start. I'm configuring that bridge, that connection between the two right now. So I got to give it a name so I can use it later on. And I got to give it a URL. So what URL am I going to give it? It's not the URL that you see here. It's a little more subtle than that. And if you go in the help section of Airtable, you see that API documentation link. So go there. And here, if you're curious, you should just read through it. It's very interesting. But essentially, they'll let you know the URL that you need to use to access that Airtable table. So this is the URL right there. All right. Here we go. So now with the one thing I need, there's one extra thing that you need to know is some, if not most of those services, those backend, they ask you for some kind of a secret to make sure that, hey, is that really you, like the owner of that table, trying to access it from somewhere else through our API? So you need to authenticate yourself, essentially. And you do that by passing it a kind of a weird string of text, like what's called an API key. And so you do have in Draftbit to specify that API key. So I'm going to do that right now. Authorization. And it looks like this typically. It's different shape, but it's all documented in that Airtable API documentation. But it looks like this. And if you don't mind, I don't really want to share mine publicly in a live stream. So I'm actually going to unshare my screen for just a sec and share it again. And you'll see Give me 1 sec. I'm doing all of that so mine does not appear on the screen. Sorry. Okay. So now I can share it back. Almost there. Okay. Here we go. So I'm back now. So I've essentially copied that line, which is the line that is used to authenticate myself, and I put it into that service. So now, so that service is gone, it's doing well. The next step is now we connected to that table, but we have to be a little bit more specific of what exactly in that table we're trying to retrieve. And so those I call endpoints. Like, what's the endpoint? You know, I know the kind of destination, the thing I'm trying to reach, but what's the specific like entry, like endpoint into that service? And so one I'm going to create is, for example, I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it get task. So I want one of the things I want to do that service is get all the tasks. So I got to specify that. This gets a little tiny bit technical. We have a lot of documentation, as you can see here. We have a guide. If you click on it, you'll have a step-by-step explanation of everything I'm going through right now and show the API key and how to use it and all. So I highly recommend you do that. So I'm not going to spend too much time doing that, but you can at least see me perform it in a real application. So it's a get mini role, and I'm going to call it tasks. Okay. Now, this is kind of the end of that URL. And with that, I should have everything I need. I can test it. Okay, here we go. So I'm in Draftbit right now, but I've retrieved information from Airtable. See, that's what's hosted on Airtable. Open a browser. That's the first task. So here it is. I've successfully established that connection. I'm going to go a little faster later on when I create the next endpoint. I'm just trying to introduce a couple of concepts here. So now I'm back to my screen. I have that connection available as a thing I can use. So I want to use it, and the way I use it, it's a fetch component. For people who know a little bit about the underlying technology, fetch is the name of the component that you use to retrieve information from outside. So that's why we also call it fetch in the Draftbit UI. Try to keep it consistent. So fetch is we're gonna have to tell it, okay, use that Airtable connection that we just established, and essentially it. So now that's it. The information is coming back, and what I want to do with that information is iterate through it. So there's a bunch of tasks. I want to take them one by one and show, like, visually I'll show like a checkbox and the text and things like that. So that's why I'm putting a list, and I'm telling the list, okay, iterate through all the records. And then inside that list, which is gonna loop as many times as I have tasks, I'm gonna start very simple. I'm gonna put like a text component, and you can see already it's iterating through all of those entry. And in Draftbit, I can mix, when it comes time to like put some text on the screen, I can mix static text, like something I hard code in it, as well as dynamic text. So if I use those double curly bracket, it lets me essentially create a variable, like a placeholder, and I can put whatever I want in it. So in my case, I'm gonna put the value that I've been getting back from that fetch component that is called name. And name, if you remember, that's the name of that column. So essentially it's going to return this value. I could have chosen status, it would have returned this value. But for the name, that's the one I want. Okay, so here it is. I'm going to use that little shortcut here to do a little web preview. So we get out of the edit draft mode and have a slightly bit of a nicer view. And that's it. So, how long did it take us? I talked a lot, but it took us a couple of minutes, and we've been able to like display data that we got from somewhere else, in our case, Airtable, into Draftbit. Okay, let's continue. So I want a checkbox. I want a checkbox that has the same status as whatever this checkbox is, because the name is not enough. I need to know if I've completed my task. So I'm going to do a checkbox. Here you go. I have a checkbox component. Oh yeah, by the way, I didn't show that. Those are all the components you have access to in Draftbit. So we have a lot of them. We're adding more regularly. We've just recently added a lot of maps related components, like a map view, a map callout, like the pin and stuff like that. So you should find most of what you're looking for. Let us know if you want something that is not in there. Always happy to consider adding more. But here it is. That's the checkbox I want. I'm going to put it here. And also, you're starting to notice. I don't know how much time and effort I put into it, but I want to do a little bit of design. I want things to look a little nicer. So you can see already now I have my checkbox and I have my text underneath. Well, I kind of want them to be in the same line. So the way you do that is I have this view component. There are many ways to do that, but I'm going to use the view component, which is just a container, right? It's just for people who are familiar with HTML and CSS. It's your div equivalent. So it by itself, it doesn't do much, but it gives us a component that we can style things on, which it'll make sense in a sec. So I'm going to put everything in there, my checkbox and my text. So nothing has changed right now because, again, view by itself doesn't do much. But now I can go to that little paintbrush icon and I can style my view the way I want. And when it comes to layout, you have different ways you can do things in Draftbit. You can position things absolutely, like an absolute position on your screen. Because we're doing mobile development, we don't really recommend that because who knows what device your application is going to be seen on. It might be a slightly bigger screen, so then your absolute design might not look as good. So what we do recommend, and what the industry recommend overall, is to use a way to lay out component that is called Flexbox. It takes a minute, for those people who know CSS. It's a little bit of a concept like that. You have to understand a few rules, and then you can really assemble them in the way you want. So I won't spend too much time on it, but there's a ton of documentation about Flexbox online. Highly recommend. I think we even have a guide. We're going to do a little side note here. You can always go to community.draftbit.com when we help our community and people ask questions and we answer that. And we share tutorials, code snippets, everything you might need. And I'm mentioning that because I think we have a Flexbox, the complete guide to layout in Draftbit using React Native Flexbox. So highly recommend you check this out. It'll teach you how to position things in a column, in vertically, horizontally, vertically, and how to spread them apart or put them together, all the kind of different combination that you might need. So highly recommend you check that out. It's a good guide. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the chat quick. Look at that. Dave is faster than me. He's already put that in the Slack. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm on my view component, and I'm going to say I want to display them as a row. So everything is kind of on the same line. All right, and I'm going to center it so visually the checkbox and the text kind of fit better a little bit. And here it is. So that's it. My list, my checkbox. Okay, now the same way in my text, I connected my text component to the data that I received. I need to do the same thing for checkbox, right? I want them to be on or off depending on what they are in my database. So I'm going to select my checkbox. I'm going to go to the data tab, and I'm going to say, okay, the data source, I want the initial value, when things are loading, I want it to be status. Remember, status is the name of the field in Airtable. We can take a look at it again. So that's what I want to map. So I want to map the data of those checkbox to the data that is here. And so when I do that already, without having to do anything else, they all got checked because that's what they are in my database. If I uncheck a few, and only keep maybe 2 or 3, and then I can come back to Draftbit, and you can see there's only 3 out of the 6 that I selected. Now you see something interesting here is that the order is not the same, right? The first one is open a browser, And then the second one is profit in Draftbit, but here it's sign up to Draftbit. So the order is not the same. So it's not really a bug. This is because when you talk to Airtable, you didn't tell it, they return all those items in a random order, more or less. So here, when I'm looking at here, they might be, they're actually here sorted by the latest. So as I add something, it's going to get added to the end. That's kind of the default Airtable behavior visually. But the API, like when I talk to them from a programmatic point of view, they don't necessarily preserve that sort. So it can be in a different order. So see, my latest showed up at like the third one in Draftbit. So we need to address that. Here's how we're going to address it. Well, first of all, I should say, you don't have to care. You can leave it like that. For people who care, I'll show you how to do it. So here, remember when we told the list, okay, you've got a bunch of stuff, just go through them one by one. Well, before we iterate to each result, before we go through them one by one, we're going to transform that list a little bit, and we're going to sort it by when things were created. And you might wonder, like, well, how do we have that information? It does turn out, like, if you look at the documentation, when you get a list of records from Airtable, they do provide you with a created time field. It's kind of hidden from the UI. You don't see it when you use Airtable, but it's there. And it does give you the time, so that's what we're going to use. We're going to use that little extra called meta information to sort the list. Okay. Okay, so for that, we're going to illustrate a very important property of Draftbit. We don't, you can transform that list, and we have a list of built-in transformation. Lets you do, you can turn it into a number. You can just say like how long is that string of text, for example. You can round the number up, round the number down. You can make a string of text, make it uppercase or lowercase, all of that. We don't have one to sort. So what do we do then? Well, in Draftbit, for everything that we don't support in a built-in way, we do let you extend Draftbit, like add your own functions, add your own feature inside Draftbit. And so that's kind of the second little icon here that's called custom code. So this is a custom code model, and you can see you can add your own function, which for those who do know to code a little bit, those that would be your JavaScript function that you can use everywhere on the platform. You can even, we might not get to that today, but you can even create your own components. Remember I talked about a text component, an image component, where you can create your own if you're not happy with the date picker component and you want a different one. Or if you want, I do myself a lot of custom component around charts and graphs. I want my own stuff, so it looks very good. And you can also import your own packages. So typically, they are not necessarily packages you will do, but you will import an open source, very popular package that's out there. So we let you do all that. What we're going to use today is just the custom function. We're going to keep it fairly simple. So I'm going to create a custom function, and I'm going to call it sort by date. Sort by date. We can always rename it later, so let's not worry too much. And the very first argument, the very first parameter I'm going to get is the array, right? It's the list of all those records. And then I need to pass it the name that we're going to want to sort by. So this, I'm going to want to say, like, go and fetch that information and use that to order things. So I need that key. I need that word. So I'm gonna call it key. Those are kind of typical terms in programming: array, key, and values, and things like that. So that's why I'm using them here. Okay, and it's gonna return kind of a different array after I've sorted it. So I'm gonna do a bunch of stuff to it, and then I'm going to return the new array. That's kind of how to think of it. Now, so typically, that's either you know the code and you'll do it yourself here. You will code that sort, or you can always, ask us, ask the community, ask Google, ask Stack Overflow for like, how do I sort an array of date? And so if you do that, I'll show you. I did it yesterday, can prepare a little bit, and so I'll show you what I got from just doing a little bit of that research. I ended up using, one sec, ended up using this thing, sort by date. So I'm going to take it. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go back to my original app. This hopefully illustrates that there's nothing wrong in just copy paste one line of code to do what you want in Draftbit. And you know what? As much as we can, resource and time-wise, we'll help you write that line of code. This is what we care about, like as opposed to we don't want you to feel blocked. So, am I in the right spot? Yeah, so custom code. I'm going to write that custom function. I forgot to save it earlier, so I've got to do it again. Sort by date, I said, right? Yeah. And this is the function that I just copied for the app. And so it takes an array and a key. And all that thing does is say, all right, we're going to sort it. That's a function. And the function, it's going to take two items in that array. And it's going to say, okay, which one should go first? And in order to decide that, it's what that thing result to. So in our case, it takes those two arrays, two items. It's going to take the specific part that's that created time value. That's why we're passing in the key, because that's the specific key you want to get. It's going to turn that into a date. It's going to do the same thing for the second item. It's going to look at them. And so which one comes first? So that's what that minus is in the middle. So that will make sure that it orders thing. The latest thing should go on top, which is the opposite of what Airtable do. That's what I want to do. I kind of want to type a task and then I click add and it shows up at the top. Don't see I want to show up at the bottom unless my text input was at the bottom. But anyway, that's up to you. You can really do what you want. I'm going to go with what I want from my point of view. Dave in the chat shared some good references for JavaScript. So the w3schools.com is a really good one. And the Mozilla kind of developer website is also a very good one. Highly recommend you check any of those to, come up with those little functions. Okay, so this is it for now. I've got my function, my custom function now. Let's see. I'm going to go back to my list. I'm going to try to apply that function. So now that I've created it, see, it shows up here, custom, sort by date. All right. So the very first parameter is the record itself, like the array itself. And I don't have to pass it. The system is smart enough to know that you're applying transformation on an object. So that object is the first parameter that you need. The second parameter, though, I need to tell it what it is, and it's just a name. Remember, it's just the name of that. What was it? It's this thing, created time. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to call it created time, and hopefully, when I do that, ta-da! You can see that everything got ordered in the list at the top. Again, the opposite behavior of what Airtable does on purpose. I could have done it the way Airtable do. I want because I'm going to put a text input at the top. So I want to type something and shows up at the top of the list. So it is. Everything showed up. So it's now ordered, which is great. Okay, what else? What are we going to need to do next? Do we want, there's many things we can do. Let's do the add, right? So I can add one. Oh, wait, no. First of all, one thing I want to do before we do the add a new task, I want to do what happened when I check the checkbox. So let's see. I'm doing a little web preview here. I've got my 3 that I already checked: iterate, create an app, and open a browser. Iterate, create an app, and open a browser. Right. So what happened when let me move that out of the way. What happened when I click the latest one. So it shows up here, but I didn't do anything so far to send that information back to my backend, right? So far, I've only kind of retrieved information, but I need things to go the other way around so I can save the fact that the user completed the task. So see, I just clicked latest in my app, but it's still unchecked here. So nothing has changed in my database, which is not good. So to do that, as I mentioned before, every time we want to specify what type of action we want to do on our backend, we go back to our data model and we have to define a new endpoint. So in addition to just getting all the tasks, I want a new endpoint to create a task. Again, I'm going a little fast here because we have a lot of docs, but essentially, if I look at the Airtable API documentation, they provide me with information about how to create a record. And what I need to do is pass it something that looks like this. So I'll format it. Oops, sorry. I'll format it a little bit better. And then, it's here, by the way, that thing I just typed is what's here. So it's kind of the end of the URL. Because I could have another table that has a different name. So I do have to specify which table. And then in the body, that's when I'm sending it, I have to be sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, good. So I have to send it something like this. And it's called a JSON object. So it has some information. That's kind of how I communicate to the backend. And all I care about right now is the status, right? So I want to send. Sorry, I mixed stuff up a little bit. We're doing the update. When I check the checkbox, it's updating something that already exists. I went too far a little bit and I started to work on the create a new one. But what we care about is the update a new one. Sorry, so let me backtrack my step a little bit. It's not a create a task, it's to update a task, right? Update record. Okay, that's got a little carried away right there. You guys did not stop me. Appreciate that. Okay, so instead of a post, it's a patch. You can see here, but it's essentially going to be an update task, same task, and the format is going to be very similar. The only, let me make sure I'm not missing anything here. Right. The main difference that we have to pass it an idea. And that's what actually made me realize I wasn't doing the right thing a second ago because there was no ID. If I'm going to want to update an existing thing, I need to tell it, like, what is that thing? Like, what's the identification of that thing? So I can change the right record and not the wrong one. So here it is. I'm going to pass it the ID. And again, I just care about the status for now. So I'm not going to change the name. So this is hard-coded right now, right? But that's not always going to be that ID. I want that to be dynamic depending on which checkbox I checked. So again, in Draftbit, every time you want to do a variable, want something that's dynamic, you use that double curly bracket. And we're going to code it. We're going to give it a name, which is going to be that placeholder name. So it's task ID. And same thing, like it's not always going to be true, the complete, sometimes I'm going to uncheck things. So for that reason, I'm just going to call it task status, task status. Okay. So I now it's dynamic in my screen. I'll be able to use different value, but I can still test it here just to make sure I at least got it right. So let me use like an existing ID and which one was it? That was open a browser, and open a browser right now is true. So let's try with false, see if that changed it. We're going to test it, save. Okay, everything is 200 okay. So things looks like they went well. And like open a browser is now false. It's unchecked, it's uncompleted. So perfect, that worked. Before I save, I'm going to do just one more thing. I'm going to be a little bit more specific, and this is to update the task, but specifically the status. Because later on, if we have time, we might do also an endpoint where we update the name itself in case you made a typo or something. All right, so I'm going to save that. Okay, now I have my two endpoints. Perfect. And so going back to my checkbox now, on the right hand side, there's a little magic one, and that's what you want to use when you want to add interaction to a component. So I'm going to click on it so you can see what it looks like. So a checkbox kind of different trigger. You can press it, or another trigger is just when it's pressed. Another one is when it's unpressed. For example, a text input has a different type of trigger. It is going to be on text change when someone like change the text. Anyways, a different interactive component can have different trigger, different things that should like prompt the application to do something specific. So in my case, on checkbox, when I press it, regardless of if it's check or uncheck, I just want on press. I can, in that case, do a few actions, do a few things. So if I click the plus, I can see a list of actions that are available. The most common one is to do an API request to essentially talk to your backend to update a piece of information, which is what we're going to do here. But the whole goal here is to do when I check, I want that information to be saved in my backend. But you can do other things like you can just navigate to a different screen. You can open the camera on your phone. So you can save a picture. You can set like a variable locally for if you want like a counter or something like that. You can get a push token if you want to do push notification in the future. You can get the location of the user that's using your app. So a bunch of stuff. We're not going to go through all of them. In this case, I just want that when the user press the checkbox, I want to do an API request. I want to talk to my backend, and I'm going to specify which backend. In my case, is that Airtable to-do list backend. And the endpoint is not the get, it's the patch. It's the one that says update the task. And we're going to have to pass it two information, the ID, because remember we said like you need to tell the backend which row, like which entry to edit. Otherwise, it's not going to edit them all, or you don't want to edit the wrong one. So you need to be specific about which entry to edit. And you need to pass it the status, like the new status. You want to change it to something new. So that's what you need to tell it. So the ID it's the ID I'm getting from my fetch, right? When I'm iterating through all of those items, I know when I'm displaying it what the ID of the item is. So that's what I'm going to use here. It's just called ID. And the status is going to be the new checkbox value. So I did not talk a lot about that, but when you added the checkbox on your screen, there's a checkbox value. There is like a data that is associated to the state of that checkbox. So now when I'm about to talk to my backend, I can say, give me the new version of that value. Give me that new checkbox value and pass that to my backend. Okay. All good. I think that's all we need to do. I can close it. It's saved now. It's right here. API request, update task. So let's give it a try. What happened if let's make sure first that they're all in the same state. So there's only two selected, iterate and create an app, iterate and create an app. Okay. What happened if I check latest? I click on it. It's been on press. It's going to run that API request and it should go to my backend and latest is now checked. So that's it. I've now done a back and forth between my backend and my front end. And that's how you connect data between the backend and front end, between Draftbit and Airtable. Okay, what next? I want to quickly show you how to add a new one. But here's a little caveat. We've seen getting, we've seen updating, adding a new task is going to be very similar. So I'm going to go pretty quick on this one. Okay, I hope I don't lose you, but I'm going to try to do it as quick as I can because I want to get to the stuff and before we spend too much time. So here it is. I'm gonna create a view that I'm gonna put at the very top, which is gonna help me like lay stuff nicely from a visual point of view. I'm gonna put a text input where I'm gonna type my new task, and I'm gonna add I'm gonna do an icon button. So not just a button that said add, although I guess technically Yeah, I'll do actually. Now, as I just said it, I think I kind of want to do a button now. Okay, that view, again, I'm going to make it a row so they're all in the same line. I kind of want that text input to take the maximum available space. So for that reason, I'm going to put it inside its own view. And I'm going to tell that view again, for those who follow that Flexbox guide, you'll know that to make sure that that view takes as much space as possible, I'm going to put like a Flexbox 1, which is going to essentially extend things. I'm going to make sure everything is kind of centered like this. It's a little annoying that my button is a little wider, so I can also tweak that a little bit. Here, how am I gonna, let me try. Am I doing? Yeah. Borders. Okay. I might just make it smaller. I don't think I'm controlling. Yeah. So I'm going to keep it 14, but I'm going to reduce. I'm going to reduce the padding on that thing. Oh, I'm messing things up a tiny bit here. Apologize for that. I guess it doesn't matter. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Oh, did I make it bold? Did I do that? I guess I did that. Right? I'm not sure. I guess bold is fine. Okay. I don't want it to be called get started. I'm going to call add a task. Okay. Enough. Now my text input, I don't want it to say enter a value. I want it to say task name. It's the name of the task. What else? If I have a little bit of time, I'll do like margin, padding, and all of that. But I want to save. I want to talk mostly about functionality here. Okay, so here's something data oriented. As I added that text input. If I go on the data side, you'll see that it created this text input value variable right here. And so we haven't talked about variable much so far. So that third little icon here is the variable models. And we have 3 types of variables. I won't go into too much detail, but your app variable is essentially what you want to save at a very high level. Like, for example, that Airtable API key that I talked to at the very beginning. If I wanted to do things a little cleaner, I'll probably put it here directly. So it can be safe like as a secret somewhere. Device variable is different in the sense that it's going to persist throughout your user session. So if a user of your app logs in, for example, and then close the app and reopen the app, you don't want them to re-log in every single time, right? Think of how you use your phone. You don't re-log into every service. When you reopen your Instagram, you don't go through like username and password every time. And so the way that works is that you save some kind of an authentication or authorization token on the user's device, and you use that to authenticate them every time when they reload the app. So that's what a device variable means. It's going to stay on their device. Screen variable is just a local variable. It's just kind of an arbitrary variable that is going to be tied to the screen. And that's the one I want to talk about, because you see we already have one here. We created it automatically for you when you added that text input. It could be named anything. It could be named new task name, whatever, it doesn't matter. So it's a string, meaning it's a text. And because we have that, now we can say that that text input is using, when you change it or type new things and all, you're going to update that variable. So that variable is always going to be filled with whatever is in that text input. Okay. So that's good. And when you click add a task, what you want to do is take that variable, that text input value, and send it to the backend. So again, we need to go back to our backend and add yet another endpoint. And that's the part that I'm going to do a little fast. Create tasks. And it's going to be a post this time. It's still tasks. Tasks. And I'm going back to my documentation Airtable. Hopefully you even see that dynamic of going back and forth between the front end, back end, and documentation for the back end is a very typical thing that you're going to have to do when you build applications. So I'm going to find the right part of the documentation, which is about creating a new record. And this is the field that it's expecting in addition to the name of the table, the method, the API key that I've already added all that. So the only thing I'm missing here is this. And so I just need to make sure I'm closing all the bracket properly. I think I am. 1, 2, nope, I did this one wrong. Okay. Now we don't need to pass it an ID here because it's a new object. So there is no existing ID. What we are going to pass it is a name, and we're going to make it dynamic again. So task name and a status. Actually, when you create a new task, let's assume that every time it's uncompleted. You know what I mean? Most tasks you're going to create, you haven't completed them yet, right? You want to complete them. So we can make it false by default, and we're not going to override it. And let's try it. Buy some butter. All right, let's test it. Okay, it looks like it went through. What about my backend? Buy some butter. Perfect. It's right there, and it's not checked because that's what we wanted. One last thing. No, that's it. Actually, that's all I want to do. I'm going to save that. Here it is. Done. So now when I select the button, the add a task button, I can go to that magic wand interaction and unpress. All those are the similar concept coming back again and again. Like there's a trigger, unpress, and I'm going to put an action. It's going to be an API request, which means I'm talking to my backend. I got to tell it which backend. So it's the Airtable one. I got to tell it which endpoint, like which functionality do I want to do. And it's not the get, it's the create tasks that I want. And when I select that, you can see it's already prompting me to pass it those variables that I created. In this case, it's just a name. And so the name, I'm going to use the one from that screen variable that we just discussed, that text input value screen variable. Here we go. So I'm going to type, as the user is going to type a task name, which is going to update that text input value variable. And when they click add a task, we're going to make an API request to our backend, and we're going to send it the value of that variable. Let's give it a try. I can close this. API request. Okay. So buy some eggs. Add a task, and boom. So right away, as I clicked it, it showed up here. Oh, let me not do that. It showed up here. It did also show up in my backend. Here it is. So everything worked properly. It's unchecked, which is what I would expect. And there's one little thing though. I kind of expected that field to go empty, right? When I added it, I want to erase that field so I can add maybe another task. Small thing, but slightly nicer user experience. So let's add it an action. When you click add a task, I'm going to do my API request, and I'm also going to set the variable, that screen variable that we're using for the text input component, and we're going to make it empty, just empty string. So now when I do buy some sugar, add a task, and that's it. My task is added, and my field is emptied. Okay, great. George and his butter. Yeah. Oh, you can see. If you guys pay attention, you can see where I'm going with that. You got some butter, got some eggs, got some sugar. Let me add a little bit of flour in it, and you'll see what we're gonna get. You're gonna get some delicious cookies out of it. I'm telling you. Okay, so we can add a task, we can edit a task. What else should we do next? We kind of add time, which I'm very happy about because that's the main thing I wanted to do. So you will do a little to-do list. There's a couple of things that we didn't do yet that were in that little video demo I presented you. Actually, let me show it to you again for those who missed it. It's something I tweeted yesterday, so I'm just going to reuse that. Here it is. So that's what it looks like. In the example I did yesterday, it's a very similar thing. It type plus. I added the ability when you click check, it crossed out the title, the word, which I can show you to do that. That's pretty cool. The other thing that I can show you how to do that I didn't do yet is editing, as you can see it right here. So you can go back and edit. Yeah, that's another cool one. And that's essentially, let's do the cross thing. And we maybe will save the editing for another time because it's a little bit more involved. But the cross thing is pretty cool. And I'm hoping we can do it fairly easily. Okay, so a few minutes. Here's how it's going to work. You're going to see it's going to be very cool. That piece of text here, first of all, I don't need the name part of it at the beginning. It's a little redundant. I can just show the name of the task. So I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm going to have two. And I'm going to say that the second one, I'm going to cross it, line through it. There we go. I'm also going to make it a little lighter. Yeah, that way you really feel like, that's it. I've done that. Okay. But now I need a way to go back and forth between the two, right? I need to say, if it's checked, show me the cross throughout version. If it's not checked, show me the plain version. Okay. So at Draftbit, the way you like show and hide components like that is when you select the component and go into your little data tab, there is something called conditional display. And so that's what we're going to use here. So we're going to follow a little bit of a naive approach, and we'll see where we get stuck, and we'll get a little bit more sophisticated over time. So, we're going to say if the status exists, show this component. So in this case, the checkbox status is false because it's not checked. So I'm not showing it. In this case, the status is true because it's checked. So I am showing it. Okay. All we need to do now is a similar thing for the second text field when the status, except this one, I want the exact opposite, right? If it does not exist. Okay. So that's it. Now when I'm already in preview mode, so when I check it, status is going to become true. So I'm going to show the first text field. And when I uncheck it, status is going to be false. I'm going to show the second text field. So you see on the screen, we only see one, but we're actually switching back and forth between those two text components. So that's pretty easy. Pretty easy to test, pretty easy to see. And yeah, and everything, of course, if I uncheck them all, actually, I just realized I'm a little dummy. I did just in reverse, right? You want that when it's checked, it's crossed through, and when it's unchecked, it's available. Let me just adjust that. So just have to instead of exist, just say doesn't exist, and same thing for the other one. So doesn't exist, say exist. Okay. Now just should be okay. Here we go. So now when I cross, it checks the list. That makes a lot more sense. So let's say I check them all, just making sure my backend still works. They all check through except for profit, which is exactly what I have here. Okay, so that works very well. And I think I'm gonna stop here in terms of features. Again, the two things we don't have right now are editing a task and deleting an entire thing. I think you made a type, you made a mistake, you didn't want it, you probably won't edit. So those will follow the same kind of the same process or workflow that we did for the other endpoints. Before I go though, I do want to show you a couple of things specific to Draftbit. So you can preview. We saw a little shortcut to see what it looks like on web, but we have this whole like preview tab that lets you see what things are going to look like on Android, iOS, and web. So those are just simulators, but it gives you a really good idea of, maybe the different rendering, the different ways things render on those different platforms, and you can test them. This is Android, and I can add a task. Here I can say this is iOS, and I can add a task. And as you can see, like things on, I should make this is web. Okay. And as I'm making changing, things get updated. And so it's catching the thing that come from the database, even though they've been entered from a different client. And I can turn that on and off. Here we go. Things update here automatically. This is Android, and this I'm going to check them all. Anyway, so you can really, that's pretty cool. You can go back and forth, see what things look like. Another thing that's really cool is, if I can show you very quickly, there's an app called Expo Go. And if you click that little live preview icon, they'll give you a QR code that you can scan through that Expo Go app. And it'll show you the app you're building on your phone, like full screen, as if it were a real app on your phone. So it's, give me 1 second, I'm going to scan that QR code. And the beauty of it is that it stays in sync. So yeah, David's right. Everybody can scan it right now, and you'll be able to test the app on your own phone right now, even though you're not close to me. It'll stay in sync. So as I'm changing in the app, if I change the title, if I change any kind of functionality, it's automatically updated on my phone. So I typically keep my phone right next to my laptop. I'm making changes on the app, and then I pick my phone and I can feel what it look and feel on a real device as opposed to on a screen. So I'm not sure how much you can see here, but this is my to-do list. Got a bunch of text messages. And I can, play it the same way I'll play with it on the web. So I can unchecked. Now I've, you might not be able to see it very well, but I've essentially unchecked every single one of those. And if I were to go back to my backend, I would see that they are all unchecked. And you can see it live even. You guys see that screen? Okay, let's try to do it live. I'm going to check on my phone, Profit. Here you go. Okay, it's popping up in my database, and it's really just without my hands, right? I'm just using the preview app, and it's affecting the database. So it really feels like it's the real app on your phone. Now, talking about real app, when you're done with your app, what we recommend is when you're in a stable place with your app, what we do recommend you do, instead of spending too long just building one more complex screens and all, is to publish it. So click publish. The first time you do it, you'll have to provide a little bit of information about your App Store, your Apple account or Google account. But the second time around, and by the way, we have a lot of, if you click here, you see we have an entire guide that is going to walk you through how to get the information, where to get it. And so you have 5 fields to answer. But after you've done it once, the second time you will see a publish button as opposed to a setup button. And it will, at this point, be a one-click publish. So we'll push that new version of your app. Every time you click on it, it'll be a new version to test flag in the case of the Apple App Store. And you'll be able to test it there and invite people to use it and things like that, and then promote it to the App Store and all of that. So that's kind of the output. The outcome of Draftbit is that you can have an app in the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. We don't just stop at a preview. Any given time, now I'm selling Draftbit a bit. Any given time, you can see the code, see what we generate. We're very transparent. You can export the code. You could even stop your Draftbit subscription if you wanted to, and still export your app and have a fully working React Native app with no like secret dependencies or things like that, completely not locked in the platform. You can push your code to GitHub if that's why with that what if that's your workflow or the workflow you have with engineers. And that's essentially it. So this ends kind of our little experiment. Took 1 hour. We made a little app in 1 hour. Pretty happy about it. Android, iOS app. I'm not sure yet what I'll do next. If I'll do another one of those sessions to do the edit and delete functionality, or if I'll just do another one of those for like another time for another audience or things like that. So again, if you watch this, whether live or recorded, we'll be sharing it on most platform. Please give me some feedback. I want to know, was it too low level, too high level, too fast, too slow, too French, too sugary, too much cookies? Let me know what you want to see in that kind of tutorial. We want to make it better. So with that said, thank you very much. I appreciate all you guys' time, and I'll see you soon. Bye, folks. Bye, Dave. Bye, everybody in the comment and chat. I'll see you soon.